स्टडी IQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।
A very warm welcome to all the dear students. In the year 2013, UPSC has introduced a new pattern in the civil service examination. In fact, they have completely changed the pattern of the mains examination. They have introduced 4 GS papers: GS paper 1, GS paper 2, GS paper 3 and GS paper 4. But what has been very new in the change that was brought in by UPSC is the introduction of the ethics, integrity and the aptitude paper, which is the much needed reform that UPSC has brought in. And subsequent to the introduction of this ethics, integrity and aptitude paper, it has been a nightmare to most of the students who are preparing for civil service, because there is no formal education in our country related to the areas like ethics, aptitude. But however, in some of the Western countries, there is a formal education with regard to the ethics and the case studies and all those things. But however, UPSC for certain reason, which I will subsequently discuss, has introduced this particular thing. It's a welcome development that has happened in the civil service examination pattern. But however, it has been very difficult for the students to accustom to these changes. Few students have been extremely doing well. But however, in order to help the students who are not in a position to understand as to what this particular subject demands, especially with regard to the case studies, so we are starting a new series in StudyIQ as to how to deal with the case studies in ethics. So this would be an introduction lecture just to make you understand as to what is a case study, why civil service, rather in civil service, why the concept of case studies has been introduced. What is expected from an aspirant to solve these case studies? So, we will do all these things, what is expected to solve in case studies and how one can do the case studies very effectively. So, we try to solve all these things in this present lecture, and then as we will move on, we will try to take up the number of case studies which has been asked in UPSC, and also number of case studies or the issues that has been concerning the society at present, and how as an administrator you would deal with these issues. So, we will also take a few cases in this way. The idea is to help and to reach out to the students who are preparing for civil service, especially with regard to the second part of the GS paper 4, that is case studies. And you might be aware of the fact that the case studies are almost 50% of the ethics paper, almost 120 to 130 marks come. And I am very sure that the students who will continue to watch this particular series on case studies, you will be able to get more than 60% of the marks in your case studies. So, before I proceed further, let me introduce myself. I am Babu Gunashekaran and I have secured All India rank 337 in Civil Service Examination 2016, and then I was supposed to get into Indian Administrative Service. Because of some reason I couldn't join, and then subsequently I started teaching for the students preparing for civil service. Even before that, I was working as an assistant commandant in Central Industrial Security Force for almost 3 years, and then I have been in the process of preparation and teaching for the last 12 years. So, I have gone through the entire change in the syllabus and I got a lot of experience in teaching and mentoring thousands of students over a period of time. So, I thought that let me share my experience and help the students who are preparing for the civil service in the future. So, let us just proceed further. Let us first try to understand a few basic questions in today's lecture, and then subsequently we will come out with the series of case studies. We will try to do at least 2 to 3 case studies in a week, so that the students also understand as to how to deal with various case studies, what is essential in a case study. But this lecture is just an introduction lecture. We will try to understand what is exactly these questions. So, once you understand these questions, then only you will be in a position to solve the case studies in the first place. So, first thing that you have to understand is what is a case study. Second is what is the purpose or what is the rationality as to why the case studies has been introduced in the civil service examination. Before 2013 it was not there. So, what happened suddenly, why it has to be introduced in the civil service examination. What are the essentials to solve a case study effectively, and there are a number of students will have to solve that. So, how your case study is going to stand out, because everybody might know the technique as to how to do it, but how your case study will stand out. a simple technique how your case study can stand out from the rest of the students. So this is the basic idea behind this particular lecture, just to give a basic idea, just to make you prepared and aware of the various requirements and the purpose, the rationality as to why this is introduced in the civil service examination. Alright, we will try to understand all these things one by one. So the first question is, what is a case study? So before I get into what is a case study, a small announcement from StudyIQ. StudyIQ has launched its prelims to interview batch for the month of August, and the prelims to interview batch has been launched in all the 3 languages, that is in English and also in the Hindi languages. Prelims to interview, as the name suggests, it covers everything which is required to clear the civil service examination, right from the prelims till the interview stage. And students who are interested in taking up the courses, they can opt for these courses in any of these languages, and if they want an additional discount on any of these courses, they can use my code Babulai. And all the courses will be in morning batches, and the last day to take admission is 11th of August. So 11th of August is when this course begins. So now come to the first question that you have to understand. As to the first thing that you have to understand is, what is a case study? So why this has been introduced is the second question that we will understand, but before that, what is a case study? So first you understand what is a case study. So case study means it's a set of facts. A set of facts that is presented in front of a decision maker. So the students are the decision maker here who are appearing for the civil service examination. So it's a set of facts which containing or which involves a number of stakeholders, containing one or more ethical issues. When I say ethical issues, so ethical issues are something which is morally right or wrong. So what is a case study? A case study is a set of facts which involves a number of stakeholders in that, which contains one or two or one or more ethical issues which is involved in that, which elicits a response from a decision maker to make a decision on that particular issue. So that is basically what is called as a case study. So that means as a civil servant, as someone who is aspiring to become a civil servant, you should be in a position to analyze certain facts. When you go to the service, there can be a number of issues in front of you. There can be issues of corruption, there can be issues of political interference, there can be issues of discrimination, there can be other issues of development, there can be number of societal issues that concerns a civil servant. So if you take any of these issues, what is very common in these issues is that there will be a set of facts. So for every issue surrounded by a set of facts, it involves a number of stakeholders around that. So probably the people will be the stakeholders, probably the government servants will be the stakeholders, a government institution may be a stakeholder, the public at large can be a stakeholder. So there are a number of stakeholders. So whatever decision that you are going to make, it can have an effect on the life of these people. So what is a case study? A case study is basically a set of facts which involves a number of stakeholders containing one or more ethical issues in that. So when you go through the facts, you will understand, okay, there are certain issues, something is right and something is wrong. So you understand that these are the issues here. And then after understanding all these things, what is the kind of response you will do? What is the kind of decision you will make to address these issues? So that is basically the idea of case study. So what is the purpose? So once you understand as to what is a case study, as I already said, so it involves a set of facts which involves a various stakeholders, which involves a number of stakeholders containing one or more ethical issues, which elicits a response from a decision maker. So in this case, the decision maker is nothing but the students appearing for the civil service. So what is the purpose? The purpose or the rationality as to why this case study approach has been introduced in the civil service examination is, as I already said, as an administrator, as a future administrator who is appearing for the civil service examination, UPSC wants to check as to how well you are able to deal with various societal issues. Suppose you become an administrator tomorrow, you become an IAS officer or you become an IPS officer, you will have to deal with a number of societal issues. Say for example, there can be organized crime in the society. Or there can be, as I already said, issues of corruption in your own department. You know that your own subordinate is involved in corruption. So as a senior officer, how you are going to deal with this particular issue? And you are newly posted as an officer in a particular place, you can see a lot of organized crime, illegal mafia or any of the other organized crime is happening in the society. And that's basically an ethical issue that has to concern an administrator. And as an administrator, how well you are carrying forward various values that you have to carry forward. Say for example, as an administrator, you have to ensure that you ensure integrity, honesty, and then there is also a specific topic in syllabus which talks about probity in public life. That means as a person who is appointed to a public office, you will have to set a highest standards of behavior when you deal with the society. That is the expectation of the society from that particular officer. So, how well you are able to do that, and at the same time how compassionate you are towards the people, at the same time how much you are dedicated to your service. Now, all these things will be tested in the form of the case studies. So, the very idea of presenting this case studies to the students is for the fact that how well they are able to deal with various issues that is concerning them in the society. Not only just in the society, the issues that can concerning them also, and during the service they may have to undergo a lot of ethical dilemmas also. For example, let us assume that you are a police officer and a case is coming in front of you, and then the case is related to a theft, not a major theft but it is a theft. And you understand that the person who has engaged in this particular theft has done it for the first time, and he has done it for the first time because let us assume his child is admitted in the hospital and there is a critical treatment that is going on, and then there is the risk of the life of the child is at risk, and hence to save the life of the child he is involved in this particular theft. But yes, there is a culpability, there is legally that is wrong. But however, you feel that it is ethically not wrong because you are putting yourself in his particular position, you are empathizing with him, you are saying that yes, legally it is wrong, but I would feel that it is ethically right. So, how are you going to deal with such dilemmas? So, all these things will be tested in the form of a case study. So, that is the idea of giving the case study, is to check whether an individual will be able to deal with various societal issues. It is not about just the theoretical knowledge, but how practically an individual will deal with all these issues once he becomes an administrator. And that is a very idea as to why this case studies has been introduced. So, this is the understanding you should have as to what is the rationality, why the case study approach has been introduced in the civil service examination. And students who are able to put across their thought process, it is very important that you will be able to put across your thought process. Once you are able to put across your thought process well, then I am very sure that you can easily cross 60% of the marks. It is a very high scoring area, high rewarding area, you do not have to spend much time also. Even let us assume that if you solve the last 5 years of case studies which is asked by UPSC, you will get a hang of what kind of questions that they are asking. You will get a hang of what kind of issues that they are asking. So, once you get a hang of all those things, then you will be in a far better position to extremely score well in the civil service examination. So, that is what exactly we are going to do today. So, starting today, which will be an introduction lecture, moving forward every class we will take up one case study and try to elaborately discuss those case studies, try to discuss with that multiple dimensions, so that you start thinking about in a different directions, just trying to open up your narrow view with regard to a particular case study, and in that way it will help you to score better in the civil service examination. Alright, now we will just proceed further and we will try to understand as to what are the essentials to solve a case study. So, what are the various essentials that is required to effectively solve a case study? So, I would say these are the essentials that will help you to solve the case studies effectively, and once you remember these essentials, I am very sure that you are going to do extremely well in the case studies. What are the essentials? So, first is read and rereads. This is very important. Why I say read and reread? Because nowadays you can see last year also that a case study is almost around more than 250 words. It is not that a small case study is given. So, you will have to comprehend the entire 250 words. So, in the first go if you are comprehending it, it is well and good, but for many students they may not be able to comprehend that, but that is not a problem. You can just have to reread it and then you will be able to comprehend the entire picture. And one of the biggest problem that the student have is that they have certain preconception or prejudgment. So, we are prejudiced based on our experience from the society or based on our previous experience. We try to use that in the case studies as well. Do not do that. Whatever is given in the case study, only that should be the source of information, only that should be taken as a fact, and according to that you will have to answer. So, just give away your preconception and prejudgment before you solve the case study, and that is very important to rationally and to logically solve a case study. Alright. So, first read and reread. I would say at least read twice a case study so that you understand and make it a process. Do not start writing your case study just by one reading. Probably you miss out certain information, miss out certain links in the case study. So, do not do that. So, read, reread the case studies. And then the next thing is understand the subject matter. If you look into the last 5 years of question paper, every case study is majorly based on a particular subject matter. So, for example, some of the case studies is based on the societal issues. It can be based on the societal issues. It can be any societal issues. It can be issues of poverty. It can be issues of development. So, these are the societal issues, or it can be an organized crime in the society. So, you as an administrator or a police officer, how would you stop this organized crime? So, that is one major area that the question has been coming. So, second thing is probity in governance. So, probity in governance is directly mentioned. Probity in governance. So, probity in governance means that as an administrator, as an IAS officer or as a police officer, somebody who is appointed to a public office, how you are going to maintain the best standards, the higher moral standards when you deal with the public. And during the course of action, what kind of conflict of interest may come. When I say conflict of interest means dealing between the personal interest and the professional responsibilities. So, many times we may have to come across, or the civil servants may have to come across these conflict of interest. So, how you are effectively going to deal with these conflict of interest is one major area where the question comes. And then sometimes question have also come from corporate governance. So, corporate governance, the issues that is there in corporate governance today, the unethical practices that is followed by the corporates in our country, or for that matter in general. And let us assume that you are an employee in a corporate and you know that there is a lot of unethical practices that is happening in a corporate. So, for example, the chemicals, say for example a manufacturing industry, the chemicals that they use for manufacturing, you know that that chemical is not good for the people, but you have the information, but at the same time you are holding a very responsible position which may be detrimental to the company if you release that information. So, here there is again you have lot of ethical dilemmas as to whether to reveal this information for the larger interest of the public, and at the same time if you reveal that the company may be shut down, what will happen to the employees and your own family. So, there is a lot of ethical dilemmas. Such type of questions can also be asked from the corporate governance. And then questions has been asked from environmental issues. And the ethical dilemmas, the corporate governance question can also be related to sexual harassment, violence in the society. So, any kind of issues that is concerning the society, and then the other issues may also be taken up and it may be asked in the examination. So, these are the major subject matters I would say as to how or from where the questions can be asked. So, we will have to be first able to identify as to what is a subject matter. Sometimes a question may have 2-3 subject matters also, or it may be predominantly centered around a particular subject matter also. So, try to identify the subject matter. And then as and when you go through, when I say read and read it, you should also be in a position to assess as to who are the various stakeholders involved in the particular process. Suppose let us assume it is an organized crime based on which a question is asking. Let us assume an illegal mining is happening in a particular place. So, who will be involved in all those things? It is the public resource that has been looted here. So, the public in large is involved. There is an organized nexus. Let us assume organized crime will happen because of some nexus between the government officials and say probably the politicians. That means that is a serious concern. That serious concern also involves probity in governance, because they are not maintaining high standards in terms of their functioning. The issues of corruption is involved in this particular area. So, who will be affected because of all those things? The public will be affected, the government officials, the government institution, the politicians probably if they are involved. So, these are all the various stakeholders in this particular process. So, try to identify the stakeholders. So, once you identify the stakeholders, it gives a broader dimension to approach to what has been asked in the question. And then the next thing that you have to identify is the ethical issues and the dilemmas. When I say ethical issues, so what are the things that you feel morally wrong in this particular thing? So, these are the ethical issues. It can be anything. So, whatever you feel that it is wrong, then that is the ethical issues in this particular thing. So, once you read that, you should also mark it down as to what are the various ethical issues in this particular case, to my opinion. So, identifying the ethical issues and the ethical dilemmas. When I say ethical dilemmas, so which you puts in a position of you are a little confused as to what to decide. whether to go this direction or whether to go this direction. So, in either cases there are certain consequences. So, there can be positive and negative consequences in either side, but you will have to decide ultimately what is the best course of action. So, it will also put you in ethical dilemmas. So, every case might have few ethical dilemmas. So, try to identify as to what are the ethical issues and the ethical dilemmas in the case studies. So, once you identify the ethical issues and the ethical dilemmas, then the next thing is to identify the directives in the question. So, that is very, very important. You will have to identify the directives. When I say you will have to identify the directives, you will have to exactly write what is asked in the question. So, what happens is again students have a prejudgment. So, once they identify all those things, they start writing whatever they have prepared earlier. No. So, you will have to clearly see what is the directive or what is the instruction in the question. So, for example, the question is asking for what are the various available options. So, I am just giving few examples. What are the various available options? Available options. So, this is one way I think UPSC is asking the question, or they can ask you what is the best course of action? What are the various available options, or you can critically evaluate the merits and demerits. So, these are the various ways that the directives can be in a particular case study, but not everything requires the same approach. Say for example, when they ask you available options, the available options could be 1, 2, 3 and 4. But when you write these options, there is no need for any continuity between one option and another option. So, when you say these are the available options, these available options are discrete options. There is no link between one option and another option. One option can be extremely morally right, one option can be extremely unethical. It is not morally right option, but still you can give a number of options. You just have to write 4 options. You have given the options, then your job might be done. But the best course of action is different from what is the available option. If you see the best course of action is something that you are putting across a logical sequence of events as to how you would deal in this particular case. So, when you write the best course of action, the best course of actions are not discrete options that you are writing, but it is a series of steps that you will take in order to address the issue that is presented in this particular case. So, there has to be continuity when you write this particular answer, probably when you write the best course of action. So, there is difference between as to what is the best option, what are the various options available and the best course of action. So, one is discrete and the next one should have a logical continuity, a logical sequence in the way it is to be answered. And then the last thing is critically evaluate the merits and demerits. There can be other directives also. So, critically evaluate the merits and demerits. So, whatever options, say for example, they might have given few options, so they wanted you to evaluate these options. So, that means your own assessment of what could be the possible positive consequences and negative consequences of these options. And that is what is the critical evaluation, critical assessment, critical examination, which means that you will have to investigate every options deeply and then you should give a fair judgment of that, whether this option is right or wrong. So, it has this issue and this has this positives as well. So, you should have a fair assessment of that particular option. So, this directive is extremely important for the students to get better marks. So, there can be other directives also, but probably what I am trying to suggest is that in every case study you should understand the subject matter. Once you understand the subject matter, then you should be able to identify the various stakeholders so that you can broaden the areas on which you can write the answers once you identify all the stakeholders, and also you will have to identify the ethical issues and the ethical dilemmas involved in this particular case, and then finally you should also understand as to what exactly is asked in the question, that is what is the directive. So, this is something that everybody has to do, but yes, some of the students score better than the other candidates because ultimately it comes to how do they put their thought process. Okay, you have identified the ethical issues, you have identified the ethical dilemmas, but how do you articulate your answer, how do you present your answer makes a lot of difference. So, that is what makes an answer different from one another, and that depends upon how rational and how logical in writing the answer. When I say rational, that you eliminate all the preconceptions and the prejudgment that you have. you completely focus on the fact that is given at you, the facts that is presented in that particular case, and your answer is strictly based on the facts. And while taking the decisions as an administrator, please understand, you should also be aware of the various basic laws in our country. When I say rational decision, you should be aware of the various basic laws in our country. Suppose let us assume it is related to sexual harassment. If it is related to Right to Information Act, probably as an administrator, you should be aware of the basic laws around. You cannot write something which is blatantly violation of the laws in our country. So you should be aware of the basic laws. You can take into the values in the constitution. You can take into consideration the atmosphere of rule of law in our country. So it has to be a very rational approach, and it has to be logically presented as well. Logically, when I say, it should be sensible also. So not only that, you will have to take into account the laws and the constitutional values, probably you can take into account certain ethical values also. You can use certain philosophical approaches as well when you write the answers. Probably you can put that also. So you can use those approaches, and then finally you can write your answer. So only when you follow a rational and a logical answer, which means that your answer has to be within the framework of the law of the land. Your answers has to be within the framework of the ethical guidelines that is accepted in our society. So when your answer should also be sensible enough. So when your answer is presented in this way, and there is a coherence in the way that you presented the answer, then I am very sure that your marks will definitely reach up to 60%. Or it can be more than that also. So this is exactly what I wanted to convey in this particular lecture. So this lecture is just to make you understand as to what is exactly required in the case studies approach. So we'll come out with a series of case studies. So in the next lecture, I'll come out with case study number 1, and probably I'll take up a case study from the Civil Services Examination 2022, what has been asked in the ethics paper 4. I'll come up with one case study. So in this way, we'll try to solve 2 to 3 case studies every week, and we'll make sure that you extremely do well in your ethics paper. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me through my Instagram account, that is Babu Gunashekaran 337, or you can also follow my Instagram. You can also follow my Telegram channel for important updates with regard to Civil Service Examination. If you want the PPT of this particular lecture, you can also get it from my Telegram channel. Thank you very much. All the very best. God bless.
StudyIQ IAS, अब तैयारी हुई अफोर्डेबल।